Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll give you a few minutes. It has been a while since I've hosted a LinkedIn Live, specifically any given Monday. I'm really happy to be here. Again, my name is LJ Finney, company is N18, and today's conversation is about recalibrating leadership for 2026. And the benefit of that is, or the conversation just in generally is, or in general, is for any leader that is thinking about how they want to approach 2026 in a different way. And one of the things that I've found most useful is looking back and reflecting on 2025. December is probably the clearest mirror you will get. You finally see what worked, you can see what didn't work, and what you need to do different for your team, or as you're growing your team, what you need to take into consideration. Some of the things that I personally learned was the lessons were insurmountable. So pull out your pens, take notes, because I will share everything that I've gained, I've learned, and that we've taught and shared with the leaders that we've worked with, specifically around communication gaps, fatigue, siloed teams, and maybe misplaced expectations of people, places, and things. The nouns will always challenge us in different ways. And sometimes we will learn the lesson more than one time. And hopefully, we will make a different decision moving forward. One of the questions that I ask everyone, or I recommend any leader do, is think about what's one leadership lesson that 2025 has taught you? I will say my greatest leadership lesson, being honest and mindful of what I want to spend my time on and how I spend my time. That's it. How I spend my time and what I spend it on. And looking at what investments I'm making in myself and the investments I'm making in others that are able to grow and amplify. So a few things that happened this year that were really exciting. I brought on an admin, and if anyone knows this conversation, I've always brought on an admin. I've always used an admin in some way, shape, or form for the past 2 or 3 years. It's just not always worked well. And I am to blame. I would say that the leadership lesson is that I have mismatched expectations. And sometimes my caviar expectations are not necessarily meeting my sardine budget. So I had to be honest about what to expect, what things or tasks were not high value added tasks on my calendar, and which things to delegate. And for every CEO and admin that I've worked with, they've had leadership teams, they've had their own admins, as many of us have, but we haven't done a good job of delegating the task that someone else can do, that you can wholeheartedly trust that they will do it with the same level of specificity and excellence that you would. And that's where the challenge is. Can I do it best, or should they? So that was my aha moment. And the leadership lesson that I learned was, outside of we know to document procedures, but really lean into letting go and spending your time elsewhere. So that was a big one for me, especially around RFP writing and being part of RFP teams. That is not always the best use of time. So that was my lesson learned, because sometimes it results in great outcomes, but the risk and the return, just as a person that has sat in finance, I couldn't quantify that. And so the conversation that you have to think about is, or I had to, how do I want to use my time for 2026? So when we look at our planning and recalibrating leadership, the one question I will ask you to just write down and ask yourself, what is one leadership lesson from 2025 that I've learned that I want to use to shape how I engage in 2026? And Q1 is not the time to fix the 2025 problems. Now is. December is the time. We're not outside. We're not playing golf. We are sitting at our desks or wherever you sit, thinking about, what do I want Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 to look like in the next, or in the upcoming year. And for most companies, it's a rinse and repeat. So for most of the clients, it's kind of continuing the same book of work or gaining more or strengthening the client relationships or expanding the client relationship or extending a new product or service into the market and demonstrating excellence in that space? That is the question that many people ask. Well, what do I want to do different in 2026? But behavior change never has any urgency. It requires intention. It never feels like the most important thing to solve. And so when we look at how we've integrated golf in this space, we're looking at intentional behavior change. We're looking at how can you do that? Teams need your clarity. They need to hear what the direction is. And so for the organizations right now that we're doing a lot of change management work, the conversation is, what's the vision? What's the direction? For the coaching clients that I have, what's the vision? What's your direction? How are you communicating that? What ways are you making it easy for people to understand? And then the recalibration piece, it's just being able to put all of the pieces together, being able to look at the alignment, look at your communication, and then look at your consistency. How often are you showing up? At a minimum, we try to produce a newsletter once a month. A newsletter is a strong form of communication, a strong way to share your view, share your perspective. It is a passive tool because people don't always consume it. They don't read it. We don't pay attention. Podcasts, social media posts, also passive. There's an expectation that there's going to be someone receiving it, but you can't guarantee that that's actually happened. So the question becomes, as you think about 2026, what ways can you be intentional in communicating your vision, communicating how you're going to do things different, and then committing to it? It's not necessarily a reset, it's not a pivot, but it's refining and showing up and showing your audience what matters. So for us, let's talk about the entire framework, the recalibration framework, I'd call it. It is reflecting, realigning, and refocusing. This is not brand new. This is not rocket science, but it is a way that I speak to change management consulting opportunities, project management consulting opportunities. We speak to our team. What do we want to do different? I have to imagine that the lesson learned for me with being able to manage my time was looking at what strengths my admin had and being able to ensure that she understands what my priorities are. So that's an easy one. But in a more difficult space, we have this larger client and the consulting conversation is around, transforming how they do business. Like digital transformation is no easy task. If you're used to doing something one way, telling an organization that we're going to remove and replace an entire platform or an entire way of work, then there is resistance. And we as leaders have to think about, well, what are the barriers to acceptance? How can we communicate that? And how do we spend our time in a very intentional way? One-on-ones seem to be very difficult because you just don't have the time to do that. So how can you use groups? How can you use other tools and other modes of communication to improve that? And then understanding communication needs and styles is equally important because we are using, so in the coaching, in the work, because coaching is like just a component of it, but it's more the strategy of how you want to approach this problem. Have some very lovely CEOs that I work with, and what we look at is their communication style. We look at their communication style, but we also look at their C-suite's communication needs. How do they need to be informed? How do they need to be updated? And while it's a difficult relationship to manage, it actually shares or plants a seed of importance. So some of the tools that we've been using are like Everything Disc. And not because it's the best tool out there, not because it's the only tool out there, but it's one of many that is very easy to use to understand my communication needs and my communication style, and then allows you to identify how others require communication. If I'm an empathetic person, then communicating facts and figures, that may not resonate. I may hear it and it may go out the other ear. So communication is one of those aha lessons. So I will take a step back and think about and share with you what my reflections included, and hopefully it can be a tool for you to think about what your 2026 plan is. Well, one, we had a wonderful golf event that we invited a few of our clients to. And it wasn't our event, it was for Finer Life Golf, because I love to give back and I love to teach children golf. Like, it is something that I personally find enriching. It fills my spirit and my soul. And because I get to see children learn, I get to watch them absorb the game and reflect and think about their actions, think about outcomes, effect and outcome. And they really are absorbing it. And there aren't as many preconceived notions about what they should be able to do, not like adults. However, so we hosted a golf outing, or we were a sponsor at this golf outing, and I got to invite clients to it and prospective clients. And I feel that that was a great business development opportunity for me, but it's the same thing I teach clients. Like, I don't tell you about something, I practice what I preach. And I will tell you, if you are thinking about business development for 2026, I want you to sit down and look at all of the golf events you attended or that you did not attend because you did not think that you could play, or you did not think that it'd be a good space. Or maybe you attended and you only went to the dinner and you missed out on the golf. I'd like you to be intentional about adding golf to your business development agenda for 2026. And if you have questions about how that relationship mapping and the strategy of it works, feel free to reach out. But the real conversation is about where and how do I want to integrate this into my personal development strategy. If you are going to use golf as a tool, if you believe that golf can open a door, if you believe that your target audience or your ideal client is somewhere in that space, then you need to show up and be present. And there's just nothing else I can say about that. So think about that, and think about how, and think about it now. Because if you're saying I'm going to play in my client's fundraiser, my client is on the board of this event and I want to support that client, I want to attend that fundraiser, I want to not just throw money at it and donate, I want to be present and in the room, then my recommendation is obviously be in the room. And you can start in January. Will you be an expert golfer by April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, when these golf outings happen? No. But if you are being intentional and you're showing up, then maybe you're sponsoring a foursome. Maybe you're bringing prospective clients. Maybe you're sponsoring a hole. Maybe you're using your time and your effort and your talent to position your business and network with others. So one of the strategies we teach in that business development component is how can you empower your entire team to be lead gen tools or cultivate lead gen at these outings. So that's the strategy that you can use. I'd say our golf outing went really well. I hope to see you next year. It will be held on July 31st. It is obviously benefiting Finer Life Golf, but the real conversation is, would you like to be a sponsor? I think you should, and bring a foursome of your clients so you could just have a good time, entertain them, get to know them, and any prospective clients actually. So that's one. Two, the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Summit. That was a highlight for us in 2026. And the reflection of that summit was, one, strong relationships are built over time. Two, it's so helpful to be in a room with other entrepreneurs that have a similar experience or have similar knowledge and information, because you can continue to learn and grow, and iron sharpens iron. So I will say one of the best investments I've made of time, talent, or treasure was in that particular program. Not just because the program was good, but because the alumni network and the benefits of staying connected keep returning on the investment. And while everything is not for everyone, and some relationships are stronger than other, the insight is that as long as you participate in some way, shape, or form, you will continue to learn and grow, and it will open your eyes to other aspects of the business or leadership process. And I've shared this with all of the clients. Have you considered what your advocacy looks like? Because that's something that we've been taught, whether it is going up, speaking to your elected officials, challenging them to act on the behalf of small business owners, to put things in place that benefit the communities that you care most about. And so that advocacy component, while we don't always look at the government affairs or government as part of the ecosystem of your business, the lesson learned in 2025 for me was my voice matters as a small business, my advocacy and my ability to understand what the elected officials are focused on and help direct them to the things that matter to me as a small business owner are important. So I learned that from peers. I have a number of individuals that I've met through Goldman Sachs or met through other programs that have become friends or colleagues. And we see the role that the elected officials play in shaping access to capital, shaping the feasibility of some of these programs that are put in place. I will say firsthand, I am in the midst of filing for an application to do business with a certain entity. And some of the questions that they've asked are counterproductive. They're not aligned with really doing business, but it made me think about, well, how can my voice support or change this policy? Or how can my voice and the experience that I have become a testimonial of why this needs to change, or how it's inequitable policy or practice that is maybe illogical. As a person that loves operations and loves standardization, process, and efficiency, this is a bad process. So what can I do to make it easier for the next business owner behind me, that so they don't have to experience the same? And like, how do I make it a personal opportunity? Well, not just personal, but how do I take my personal experience and make it an opportunity for change that improves the experience for minority women business owners, or for small business owners, or even the term that has kind of captured what my business represents, a micro business. I'm a small entity. I don't have a lot of employees. I use 1099s. And so what can I personally do to affect change and improve the outcomes for other business owners? Because one day I might be a billion-dollar industry, but today I am a small business owner that has a finite amount of time. And so before someone drains me of that time, I need to think about how I will support others, and not just myself. So that's one. You can always give back in that, but you can also generate more revenue and relationships and just improve the outcome for the society in general by taking an intentional step. So that was number 2. And then another point of reflection was I hired someone to update my website. And if you saw it, it was excellent. However, there were some challenges with that. And so the lesson learned is, as we think about delegating and hiring people to do work for us, how do we maintain the quality, implement the controls necessary to get the feedback of whether it's good or bad? I can tell you, when I really took the time out, maybe like 4 months after I had paid to look through it, I'm like, oh my gosh, there are some errors on here. How did I miss this? But I missed it because I didn't spend the time reviewing it. So I'd say that even as we delegate, we have to put some controls in place to ensure that it meets the standard. And while that's a small business owner's challenge, the same is true for leaders that are stepping into new domains or that are looking to take that delegation of a task, or take delegation of a task to a new space or entity, if that makes sense. It would be, I look at the business owners that I'm managing. Maybe there's, I will say, for the change management contract, the individuals and the entities, they've been at their jobs for 20 or 30 years, give or take. Maybe some people have been there 5 or 10 years, but they face the same challenges. How do I delegate and allow someone else to do something that I would be really great at, or that I do really well? And how do I not micromanage them, but review the content in a way that allows me to provide constructive feedback, that allows them to continue to be engaged and not disengaged, and allows them to grow and thrive in the role and start to add their own vision, their own ideas to it, and not stifle their growth. It is one of the challenges that I see with the change management work, because people are just uncomfortable with change, But even within self, it is difficult to execute. But I will say my website was updated. There's some things that are still not quite right, but I will acknowledge that it's delegation without abdication. And I preach on this all the time. For the 3 or 4 CEOs that we're working with, we say, if you're going to delegate, do not abdicate. It does not mean that it's a hands-off, laissez-faire approach where you just throw it over the fence and never look back again. That is not the case, because you are in charge of the vision. You are in charge of execution. So how do you delegate and not abdicate? The question that you must ask yourself as you think about how to free up more time so you can do the work that generates the revenue, or that retains the client, or that is the magic that made you the CEO or the president or the person in charge, the manager, the leader, whomever you are. One of my coaching clients, she often asks, how do I support my team? Like, I'm looking for different ways to grow them. And I said, well, if you give them direction and you think about the overall direction, they can't always see the bigger picture, but you paint the bigger picture and you show people where they play a role, and then allow them to be creative in how they execute that role and give them insight, give them feedback. But the delegation piece and the website review, I will say, lessons learned. As a person that can write my own website, because I did the first one myself, I don't believe I should write the second one. And I tried to take a step back, but I took too far a step back, and so it still needs some work. Lesson learned. The RFP debacles, the other lesson learned. I feel like one of the biggest observations was mismatched expectations. As a business owner, your priority, and as a leader, your priority is to, how do I continue to grow this business? And how do I maintain the relationships and build them and cultivate them in an authentic and organic way? How do I do that? What does that look like? Whether it's, there's a whole conversation around how do I automate or shift processes to be more efficient so that I can use AI to 10x my business. Okay. How do you do that? What do you have documented? Where do you see the biggest gap? Where is the greatest opportunity cost? What are the things that are highly inefficient? Like, for every person that we work with, if you don't know where you're starting from, how do you know where you're going? This recalibration conversation is something you can apply in any industry, in any situation, in any change. You want to use AI to automate your business processes. You want to use AI in a way to help you generate more leads. You want to use AI to streamline operations. You want to use AI you want to use it for everything, but you don't know what you really want to use it for. Then the bigger conversation is, where do I find the greatest inefficiencies? And 2025 is your time. If it's calendar inefficiencies, let's talk about that. If it's following up, then talk about that and really look at, well, what is the tool, or what is the way that I need to solve that? So inefficiencies around utilization of your time and how can you use technology to improve that? The conversation is not just throw the technology out there. The conversation is look at what didn't work well and where you spent the most time or felt like you wasted the most time. I will tell you, I wasted the most time with meetings that were missed. And it should be an easy thing, but your calendar gets blocked up and filled with appointments. And then if the person doesn't show, that is a waste of your time. And things happen. I get it. Like, nothing is guaranteed, and we are always moving and addressing emergencies and issues. But the time blocking or carving out time that if the meeting didn't happen, it wouldn't impact your day, that has probably been the most valuable pivot that I've made. And time blocking is not a new concept either, but actively using that as your strategy, or actively using that or applying it or living by it, that's a different conversation. It's like, I have the gym membership, but I don't necessarily go to the gym. You have to use it. So time blocking was one of the strategies that, how many books have I read it in? Multiple. But time blocking was one of the strategies that I used to carve out the meeting time and just honoring that and adhering to that. I will say the other thing that what did work was finding accountability groups that are actually full of accountable people. That mattered. It mattered because when you start to feel discouraged, or you start to feel distracted, or you're pulled in another direction, these accountability groups kind of keep you focused on the bigger picture and the prize, and not pulled in a million directions, but looking at the thing that matters the most. And one of the tools that I've used that I felt was very helpful, and I will go back to, was the 12-week year, not because of the book itself, and not even just because of like the accountability group. It was the cadence and the process around creating smart goals that were broken down into actionable week by week tasks. I found that extraordinarily helpful. And so I share that with you because whatever your plan is, decide it and stick to it and give it time to work. Don't just magically pivot. I will also say I had the best experience with my retreat clients. I really enjoyed them. I enjoyed working with them. I enjoyed bringing their visions to life. And I think that, or I know that, the unique experience was based on our ability to pare down, extract out what it is they wanted to accomplish. They wanted to create community. They wanted to create an environment that broke down silos. They wanted to get people more engaged. There were so many different reasons that the CEO or president reached out to ask about a retreat. I did a board retreat most recently, maybe like last month, and the vision of the president was, I need them to be engaged. I need them to see the vision, and I need them to think about how they want to add to it. And I had so much fun designing that I look back and I think about what were the lessons learned. The lessons learned were leaders with vision. Sometimes they just need someone that's not going to just tell them yes. Sometimes they need a strategic thought partner. And that's where we add the most value. And I enjoyed that the most. This opportunity to work with the board, the reason it worked in the way that it did, one, we got to survey the board to understand their position on the president's views and the work they were doing. So two separate streams of consciousness and research brought together to create an event. So that was one of the strategies I used. Two, making everything experiential. Like that is where I love, or where we thrive as a company. Experience-based learning. It is exciting. It resonates. It helps people remember. It's not just another activity or exercise. It's something that is directly designed to help them remember the specific thing. And I'm very excited for the this particular client, because post-retreat, it doesn't end there. That's just, the work is just beginning. You sat in a room together. Accountability comes on month 1, month 2, and month 3 post-retreat. And that's where I think that leaders have the greatest opportunity for growth. They have the greatest opportunity for long-standing, long-lasting change. It's not just by delivering the event, it's what happens next. So we put all this work and effort into designing it, but how do we keep the momentum? How do we maintain that? So I'd say for that client, I'm excited for what's to come. And for the other client, where we were really focusing on their entire organizational culture shifting, I'd say the biggest value was being able to hear the voices of the people. I love surveys. It is the greatest way to gather data. It is the best way for you to understand what the position of the people that you're serving are. Sometimes we are afraid to hear the difficult things, but getting feedback is the greatest mirror. And I love a mirror. So if you're going to look in the mirror and you're going to be self-aware, let's look at what's working, the feedback, and the insight and input that people are giving. I think that builds the most secure leaders. It's about making the connection to the people, connection to the change. And some people are not going to be bought in. And it's not your job to convince everyone, but it's your job as a leader to give the vision and the strategy. So as you think about what worked well in 2025 and what didn't work, like me working on certain projects, it didn't work. And I've come to the realization that strong leaders need strong leaders. And that just is what it is. But that is a lesson learned about what my priorities are. And as you think about what your priorities, be honest with yourself. What is important to you? Transparency is important to me. Integrity is important to me. Being able to uplift as I climb that's important to me. So how do I put myself in spaces that do that? And golf is important to me, but you already know that. So if your organization is thinking like, how do I bring people together and get them excited? How do I help align everyone so that they're all working together? We don't have these silos. We're looking at a more cross-functional space where, I'm in a nonprofit space. I need to capitalize on this wealth of information that my board has. My board is so talented. So like I said on the board too, they're so talented. I need an external me to help me pull out the things from my board that I get from other people. How do I know that? Because sometimes we are in our own way. It happens. But in this case, how do we extract out the greatest insights from our board members so that we can take that information and create plans to execute and layer it onto strategy and layer it onto the vision so that we can actually do something, not just ideas in the universe, but things that we want to actionably address in the new year. How do we do that? Well, I say a retreat is your best way, taking people out of the space, out of the places that they sit on a normal basis, putting them into new environments and creating inertia, creating that an explosive and exciting engagement, because ideas and being able, if you're open-minded and you sit in those spaces, the number of ideas that get generated abundant. The ability to pair through those ideas and identify the ones that can offer the greatest results real time. That's where the science is. It's not just about facilitating. It's about utilizing, and maybe this is just a me thing, it's utilizing the business analysis, the project management, and the change management together to work with leaders and help them find the most actionable path forward. What does change look like? How do we want to communicate it? How do we want to gather feedback? What does the vision of your organization look like? How do you want to capture that? It's not just a Google form that is a survey. It is, who do I need to talk to? Maybe it's a RACI chart, like who's responsible, accountable, who just needs to be informed, or who needs to be consulted. Using all of the tools to pull out and think about, what does this retreat and offsite experience need to look like? What do I want people to leave with? What do I want them to do once they've gone? And how do I want to hold them accountable for that so that we don't return 12 months from now and we're having the same conversation? What does change look like? What does transformation look like? And what does success look like? So the quick questions I'll say, because I am a little bit over time, but I am so glad you joined me for this final Any Given Monday. I was going every week and then I stopped. And what I realized is that I could not do anything every week, but on Any Given Monday, hence the name, hence the title. I don't like football. So what's one thing that you would want your team to do different in 2026? What is one thing that you want your board, for my nonprofit clients and for those that are leading nonprofits and they're in the leadership roles, not necessarily on the programmatic perspective, but maybe even from a program perspective, what's one thing that you want them to do different in 2026? Whether it's like, I've got this masterful relationship mapping exercise that I get to do with some of my clients. So engaging, it really is about doing the diagrams to figure out how do you want to capitalize on the existing relationships you have. And if you want me to continue doing Any Given Monday lives, drop me a DM and send me some topics that you want me to discuss. I can tell you how to do an executive retreat. If you're going to plan it on your own, I can give you some DIY, but it's always fun to have someone executing, because I get to be the mediator, the moderator, and the person that hears all of the voices, especially if you have very strong voices. The one thing I will say about the boards and the people I work with, tremendously talented. No, everyone brings a unique and valuable perspective. But the problem is they talk past one another. They are literally saying the same thing. And when you're in that room, to be able to moderate the conversation, to facilitate the conversation, to gather all voices, and to really help the quieter voices be heard, that's where the gift and the talent is of using someone else. So anyway, what's one thing that you want to do different in 2026? And if there's a topic you want to talk about, like how am I going to use golf? Call me, DM me, I am excited to share that with you. Thank you for spending your time today. Recalibration, it's not a decision. It's not a reaction. It is, well, actually, it is a decision. To recalibrate, it's a choice. It's I choose to do something different than last year, and I'm doing it based on information, not from a finger in the sky, not from something that I've seen on social media, but it's intentional. So recalibration is actually a decision. And if you're ready to bring this alignment into your business model, into your organization, onto your teams, and just into the community, whether it's your new grads, your associates, your middle managers, who are often the most neglected community, and then neglected because they kind of sit in the middle and they don't really have the support necessary to craft the vision, but then they're also the ones trying to like keep the fires out. Let's talk. Let's talk about what 2026 looks like and how NET can support you. I appreciate you. See you soon. Happy holidays. Don't forget to send all of your holiday cards, and thank everyone for their time. Book time with us, and we'll see you next year.